The Melisende Psalter is an illuminated manuscript commissioned around 1135 in the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem, probably by King Fulk for his wife Queen Melisende. It is a notable example of Crusader art, which resulted from a merging of the artistic styles of Roman Catholic Europe, the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire, and the art of the Armenian illuminated manuscript. 7 scribes and illuminators, working in the scriptorium built by the Crusaders in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, were involved in the creation of the Psalter. It measures 21.6 centimetres by 14 centimetres. This manuscript forms part of the Egerton collection in the British Library. The New Testament cycle. The first 24 illustrations depict scenes from the New Testament. New Testament images were commonly found at the beginning of Western psalters, unlike in Eastern psalters, but in this case the images depict scenes more common in the Eastern Orthodox liturgy. The scenes depicted are the Annunciation, Visitation, the Nativity, the Adoration of the Magi, the presentation of Jesus at the Temple, the Baptism of Jesus, the Temptation of Christ, the Transfiguration, the Raising of Lazarus, the Triumphal Entry into Jerusalem, the Last Supper, the Washing of the Feet, the Agony in the Garden, the Betrayal of Judas, the Crucifixion of Jesus, the Descent from the Cross, the Lamentation, the Harrowing of Hell, the Three Marys at the Tomb, and the Deesis. These illustrations were made by an illuminator named Basilius, who signed the last illustration Basilius-me-fecit, and is the only named illuminator or scribe of this manuscript. Nothing is known about Basilius, but because of his Greek name it has been suggested that he was a Byzantine artist. It is also possible that he was a Western artist who had been trained in a Greek style, maybe in Constantinople, or he may have been an Armenian Catholic familiar with both Catholic and Orthodox traditions. The calendar. Folios 13 to 21 contain the calendar, which is strikingly similar to Psalter calendars produced in England in the same period. It appears to be based on a calendar of St. Swithin's Church in Winchester. The calendar is filled with English saint days rather than those more popular in Jerusalem, and one name, Street, Martin of Tours, who isn't popular throughout Europe, is written in gold, for unknown reasons. 3 Crusader-specific dates are mentioned in the calendar: the capture of Jerusalem on July 15, the death of Baldwin II on August 21, and the death of his wife Morphia on October 1. Each month also has a medallion with the sign of the zodiac, illustrated in a Romanesque style with heavy Islamic influences. The Psalter, folios 22 to 196, contain the Latin psalms written in a northern French script. A third illuminator painted the initial letters of each psalm. Some initials take up the entire side of a leaf, and are drawn with gold lettering on a purple background. They show influence from Italian and Islamic art, possibly suggesting that the artist was trained in Muslim-influenced southern Italy. Prayers to the saints. The scribe who wrote the psalms also wrote a series of prayers on folios 197 to 211, dedicated to 9 saints: the Virgin Mary, St. Michael, Street, John the Baptist, St. Peter, St. John the Evangelist, St. Stephen, St. Nicholas, St. Mary Magdalene, and St. Agnes. The prayers are accompanied by paintings of the saints by a 4th illuminator trained in a Romanesque style, but his technique also shows an attempt to incorporate a Byzantine style. There are a few blank and undecorated spaces in this section of the Psalter, and it may be incomplete. The covers. The ivory covers, decorated with some small turquoise beads, show scenes from the life of King David and from the Psychomachia of Prudentius on the front side, and another king performing the 6 works of mercy from the Gospel of Matthew on the backside, both showing influence from Byzantine, Islamic, and Western art. The geometric designs on the covers are especially influenced by Islamic art. The king on the back side is dressed in Byzantine imperial clothes, but most likely represents a Crusader king, perhaps Fulk. There is a carving of a falcon above him, which is possibly a clue that the king is Fulk, as falcon and Fulk in Old French were both Fouquet. Quote, underneath the falcon the name Herodias is carved, Latin for gerfalcon, although the artist has not signed in the same way Basilius has. The spine of the Psalter is decorated with Byzantine silk and silver thread, as well as red, blue, and green Greek crosses. The spine was stitched by an artisan who was perhaps a Westerner trained in a Byzantine style, as his stitching is not as smooth as other examples of Byzantine silk spines made by native Greeks. Date and recipient. The exact date of the Psalter, and for whom it was made, is unknown, although it is obviously made for a noble woman of the kingdom. Based on the use of Byzantine styles, the depictions of kings, and the use of feminine word endings in the Latin prayers, through circumstantial evidence Melisende can probably be identified as the recipient. The English influence in the calendar and elsewhere likely comes from Fulk, whose Angevin relatives ruled England at the time. It is also notable that aside from the capture of Jerusalem, the only Crusader-specific dates in the calendar are the deaths of Melisende's parents. The mixture of Catholic and Orthodox elements in the Psalter may reflect Melisende's mixed upbringing. If Melisende was indeed the recipient, then the Psalter was most likely commissioned by Fulk, probably around 1135. Prior to this, Fulk and Melisende had been fighting for superiority in the kingdom, and Melisende had allied with rebels against Fulk. By 1134 they had reconciled, and the Psalter had to have been written after 1131, the date of Baldwin II's death. On the other hand, it could have been written any time before Melisende's death in 1151. Paleographical comparisons to other texts produced in Jerusalem suggest it was written in the 1140s, but the later texts may have used the Melisende Psalter as a source. The manuscript was perhaps owned by Grande Chartreuse, Grenoble, in the early 19th century. By about 1840 it was owned by Ambroise Cammarmond, director of the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Lyon. Its next owner was Guglielmo Libri, who is most famous for stealing medieval manuscripts from French public libraries. He sold it to the London book dealers Payne and Foss, who in turn sold to the British Museum in November 1845.